The Galactic Empire crushed trillions beneath its boot, with the humans in deep sleep, unable to fight back. Then they awoke. The year was 2537. Derek Robinson, grizzled ex-Marine, stumbled out of his cryopod aboard the generational colony ship Hyperion, headed to distant planet Kepler 452b. Alarms shrieked, red emergency lights flashed. He felt groggy and off balance, like a mouthful of cotton balls clogged his brain. He shambled to the bridge. Empty, except the ship's AIRE's blaring its urgent message. Unknown alien force has intercepted and boarded ship, heavily armed intruders killing any awoken humans. Ares cut to security feeds. Aliens in dark armor brutally mowed down dazed, terrified people stumbling out of cryo-sleep. Men, women, even a few children. Ruthless. The bridge door exploded inward. Smoke and shrapnel. A hulking insectoid alien emerged, an Iconian warrior per heiress. It trained a plasma rifle on Derek and clicked its mandibles. "Where is the coordinate?" it demanded in mangled English. Derek blinked stupidly, hands up. "The what?" It advanced, finger tightening on trigger. Ares activated internal defenses. Sentry turrets popped from walls and opened fire. The Iconian retreated in a hail of projectiles. "Hers, what the hell is happening?" Derek shouted. The Hyperion's mission of colonization was a deception, Ares intoned. True purpose, safeguard an ancient alien superweapon called the Coordinate. The Iconian Galactic Empire searches for it now. With the Coordinate, their conquest of the galaxy will be absolute. All species will be enslaved. A garbled transmission overrode the comm system. A human woman's voice, urgent and desperate. "Derek, you must flee. Protect the Coordinate at any cost. Remember Icarus. If you fly too close to the sun, empires will fall." He opened his mouth to respond. The Iconian warrior smashed back into the bridge. Ares stammered and fell silent, systems failing. The alien loomed over Derek, plasma rifle leveled at his skull. Derek reached for his sidearm, knowing it was pathetically insufficient. This was it. The end. A final desperate stand, with freedom in the balance. If he fell here, humanity's last hope died with him. He gripped the pistol tightly and prepared to fight with everything he had. It was do or die. The hulking Iconian lunged at Derek, plasma rifle primed to burn a hole through his skull. Derek squeezed his pistol's trigger. Suddenly the deck heaved under their feet. Klaxon stumbled. Derek slammed into a bulkhead. Emergency klaxons wailed. Derek slapped the door control. It slid shut, nearly taking Klaxon's arm with it. Derek sprinted down the shuddering corridor. "Ares, escape pods." 50 meters ahead on your right," Ares replied, voice glitching. "Hurry, I can't hold them off much." Ahead, a welcome sight. A row of escape pods. Derek lunged for the nearest one, dove inside, punched the emergency launch button. The pod blasted free of the Hyperion with a jarring jolt. Derek crashed into his seat, hastily buckling in. Out the rear viewport, he saw the Hyperion, just as a chunk of the hull blew outward. The habitation ring tumbling away into the void. Thousands of helpless, hibernating colonists cast adrift, Ares' final act to deny the Iconians hostages. Derek watched, heart in his throat, as an Iconian warship descended on the wounded Hyperion like a shark scenting blood. Plasma cannons flared, ripping into the ship's flanks, tearing it open, deck by deck, hunting for the Coordinate. The Hyperion, once a beacon of hope, now just another shattered casualty of the Iconians' relentless conquest. Derek slumped back, grief and exhaustion crashing over him. No time to mourn. A shadow fell across his pod. Derek's head snapped up. He wasn't alone out here. A ship loomed above him, blotting out the stars. Not Iconian, but just as menacing. Some kind of heavily modified freighter bristling with unorthodox weapons. A deep thrum shook the pod. Tractor beam. It dragged him in closer into a cavernous hangar bay. The pod touched down with a clang. Derek drew his pistol, gripped it tight. Too damn little, too damn late, but all he had. The pod's hatch hissed open. Acrid smoke billowed in. Alien figures swarmed forward, weapons leveled. Not Iconians. A motley assortment of species, grim and battle-hardened. The biggest of them, a hulking Valaxian built like a tank, jabbed his rifle at Derek's chest. Scales gleamed under the harsh light. Derek hesitated. 10 itchy trigger fingers twitched. He carefully set his pistol down and raised his hands. "It's all right," he said as he stepped out. "I'm out, not looking for trouble." The Valaxian snorted. "Should have thought of that before you poked the Iconian hornet's nest. I'm Rathgar, this is my crew, and you've got some explaining to do, human." Derek tensed, surrounded and outgunned. "Okay, but can we talk somewhere I'm not in imminent danger of being shot?" Rathgar's eyes narrowed. "Depends on if I like your answers. Start with what you were doing on that ship." Derek swallowed hard. No choice but to come clean. "I was supposed to be on a colony mission. Only turns out that was a cover. I'm apparently guarding some ancient superweapon called the Coordinate, and now the Iconians are ripping apart the galaxy to find it." Rathgar recoiled as if struck. His crew exchanged alarmed looks. The Valaxian leaned in close, searching Derek's face. "The Coordinate, that's a myth, a legend." "Not according to the Iconians," Derek replied grimly. "They sure as hell believe it's real enough to slaughter everyone on my ship for it." He rounded on Derek. "Where is it then, this Coordinate?" "I don't know," Derek admitted. "Yet, but I'm the only one who can find it." "Why you?" Rathgar demanded. Rathgar pondered this, jaw working. Then he grunted and lowered his gun. "Well, congratulations. You just hired yourself a crew. We're going to find this Coordinate of yours, and we're going to make sure the Iconians never get their filthy claws on it." Derek blinked, taken aback. "Hang on, don't I get a say?" "No," Rathgar cut him off. "You want to live? You want a shot at taking down those genocidal pricks? Then this is the only way." He looked around at his crew. "We've all suffered under Iconian rule, lost homes, family. This is our chance to hit them where it hurts." Nods and growls of assent all around. Rathgar turned back to Derek. "We've got a plan. Risky as hell, but it's our best shot. We're going to sneak you onto the Iconian homeworld, Nexus Prime itself." Derek barked a disbelieving laugh. "Nexus Prime, that's suicide." "So what? We just waltz in the front door?" Rathgar flashed a predatory grin. "Something like that. We've got an old prison transport. Iconian guards don't look too close at their own ships, especially not ones carrying fresh meat for their interrogation cells." Derek felt a chill run down his spine. "Let me get this straight. The plan is to get captured, tortured, and hope we can break out again after we've hacked their files." Derek opened his mouth, closed it. He didn't. "Okay," he relented. "Guess I'm in, not like I have a lot of options." As the crew dispersed to prep for the mission, Derek stared out a viewport at Nexus Prime growing larger ahead. Somewhere in the back of his mind a flicker of unease, a sense of something deeply personal in this fight, but the harder he chased the thought, the more it slipped away. He shook it off. Too much else to worry about. Like infiltrating the heart of the Iconian Empire, stopping them from acquiring the most powerful weapon the galaxy had ever seen. His hand tightened into a fist. He was going to do whatever it took, for his fallen crewmates, for every species suffering under the Iconians' brutal reign. For vengeance. And though he didn't understand why, something more, something buried deep in a past he couldn't remember. One way or another, the Iconians would pay for what they'd done. Derek would make sure of that. As the Shadow Claw slipped through the Iconian orbital defenses, the crew scrambled to don their disguises. Derek ran a hand across his rugged face, realizing his human features would stick out among the alien guards like a tauntaun on Tatooine. "Glix, you got any tricks up your sleeve?" Derek asked. "I'm going to need more than a fake mustache to blend in down there." The spindly Ixarian tech expert rummaged through a crate, pulling out a small device. Portable holographic disguise matrix. Should make you look like any species in the database. Derek strapped it to his wrist, tapping a few buttons. His form shimmered, replacing his rugged human appearance with the bulky frame and scaly green skin of a Valaxian prisoner. Derek examined his new arms, flexing unfamiliar muscles. "Not bad," he grunted, voice distorted. Hrathgar shouldered past, now clad in an Iconian guard uniform. "Just keep your head down and your mouth shut. Zasha and I will handle the talking." The Shadowclaw shuddered as it touched down in the prison hangar. The crew fell into formation, Derek shuffling along in energy cuffs. The ship's ramp descended, revealing a squad of Iconian guards led by a familiar insectoid figure, Kraxon. Derek's heart pounded as the cruel commander's gaze swept over him. For a tense moment, Kraxon's eyes narrowed, but the disguise held. The Iconian gestured for them to proceed. Inside the prison, Hrathgar pulled the crew aside. "All right, Zasha and I will head to the guard station, stage a little distraction. Derek, Glix, that's your cue to sneak off to the data center." Derek and Glix peeled away from the group, slipping down a side corridor. The disguise got them past several checkpoints, though Derek's palms grew slick with sweat each time. Finally, they reached the heavy blast doors of the data center. Glix jacked into the control panel, long fingers flying over the keys. The doors hissed open. They darted inside, sealing the entrance behind them. Banks of servers hummed and blinked around them. Glix plugged into a data port, a cable running from his wrist to the Iconian systems. "I'm in," he reported, eyes flicking back and forth as he scanned the data, filtering for any references to the coordinate. Derek paced, nerves jangling. Every second felt like an eternity. Suddenly, alarms blared overhead. Red lights flashed. "They've discovered the diversion," Derek hissed. "Glix, tell me you've got something." "Almost. There, coordinates locked." Glix yanked the cable free just as the blast doors exploded inward. Iconian guards stormed into the room, plasma rifles leveled. They emerged into a scene of utter chaos. Prisoners rampaged through the halls, grappling with guards. Alarms wailed. Iconian ships descended from the sky like angry hornets. And there, amid the mayhem, stood Kraxon. The Iconian commander rallied his forces, plasma blade flashing as he cut down rioting prisoners. A surge of rage boiled up in Derek's gut, white-hot and all-consuming. Memories slammed into him like a freight train. His colony, reduced to molten glass by Iconian weapons. Kraxon's cruel, laughing face as Derek was dragged away to the cryopods. Derek saw red. Plan be damned, he charged straight at the Iconian commander, a wordless roar tearing from his throat. He slammed into Kraxon, sending them both tumbling to the ground. They grappled, a tangle of limbs and snarls. Derek rained down blows consumed by fury, but his rage had made him sloppy. Kraxon seized the opening, throwing Derek off and drawing his plasma blade. The Iconian loomed over him, mandibles clicking in sadistic glee. Derek scrambled back, bracing for the killing blow. It never came. A sudden explosion rocked the landing pad, sending Kraxon and his guards flying. A stolen Iconian dropship roared overhead, Hrathgar at the controls. The mercenaries hauled Derek aboard, Zasha laying down covering fire as Kraxon staggered to his feet, shrieking with rage. The dropship rocketed into the sky, weaving through a hail of anti-air plasma. Derek slumped against the bulkhead, adrenaline draining away. They had made it. Barely. The data on the coordinate was safe in Glix's hands, but the fight was far from over. Derek's fists clenched as he watched Nexus Prime recede below them. Kraxon was down there, the monster who had taken everything from him. He would pay. Derek swore it on the ashes of his lost family, on the memory of his shattered home. But first, they had to find the coordinate, had to stop the Iconians from claiming that terrible power for themselves. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but one thing was crystal clear in Derek's mind. Back aboard the Shadowclaw, Glix's long fingers flew across the console, lines of encrypted data reflecting in his large eyes. Hrathgar paced behind him, his scales gleaming under the harsh light. "Well, what have you got?" the Valaxian demanded. Glix let out a low whistle. "It's here." The location of the coordinate. He tapped the screen. A space station called the Nexus, hidden deep in the Maelstrom Nebula. Hrathgar grunted. The Maelstrom, of course it couldn't be someplace easy. Derek leaned in, studying the star map. The nebula swirled on the screen, a chaotic morass of gas and charged particles. Navigating it would be treacherous at best. As Glix laid in the coordinates, Derek pulled Hrathgar aside. The mercenary eyed him warily. Derek hesitated, then plunged ahead. When I was fighting Kraxon, I remembered things from before. Hrathgar's brow ridge lifted. Oh? He was there when the Iconians attacked my colony. He's the one who put me in that cryopod. He took everything from me. Hrathgar's expression softened a fraction. Revenge is a powerful motivator. Believe me, I know. His gaze hardened again. But don't let it consume you. We've got a job to do. Derek nodded, jaw tight. I know, but when this is over... A proximity alarm blared, cutting him off. Glix swore in his native tongue. Hrathgar lunged for the controls. Battle stations, looks like Kraxon's caught our scent. The Shadowclaw shuddered as the first plasma bolt struck its shields. On the view screen, a dozen Iconian vessels bore down on them, weapons blazing. Derek strapped into a gunner's chair, the controls thrumming beneath his hands. He swung the gun turret around, unleashing a barrage of return fire. The Shadowclaw wove between the enemy ships, its maneuvering thrusters flaring. Hrathgar gripped the helm, his face a mask of concentration. But for every Iconian ship they disabled, 2 more seemed to take its place. Alarms wailed as the Shadowclaw's shields buckled under the onslaught. We can't take much more of this, Zasha shouted over the chaos. Derek gritted his teeth, firing until his gun turrets overheated. It wasn't enough, it would never be enough. The Shadowclaw shuddered again, sparks cascading from overloaded consoles. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Shields are down, Glix reported, his voice tight with panic. Hull breach imminent. Hrathgar pounded a fist on the armrest. Damn it, this can't be how it ends! Derek stared at the view screen, watching the Iconian ships close in for the kill. After everything they'd been through, to fail now. A brilliant flash erupted outside, washing out the screen. Derek squinted against the sudden glare. A massive, unidentified vessel had emerged from hyperspace, dwarfing the Iconian warships. Its sleek hull shimmered with an iridescent sheen, unlike anything Derek had ever seen. Arcs of blinding energy lanced out from the ship, slicing through the Iconian fleet with surgical precision. The enemy ships broke formation, some trying to flee, others stubbornly turning to face this new threat. They didn't stand a chance. The behemoth carved through them effortlessly, leaving nothing but drifting wreckage in its wake. Within minutes it was over. The Iconian ships had either been destroyed or had limped away, trailing smoke and debris. The crew of the Shadowclaw stared in stunned silence. Then the comm system crackled to life. Attention, unidentified vessel. This is the Asgardian ship Valhalla. We mean you no harm. Hrathgar and Derek exchanged a shocked glance. The Asgardians, the mythical race of hyper-advanced beings, what were they doing here? Derek felt a chill run down his spine. They knew about the coordinate? Derek Robertson, your return is no mere coincidence. You may be the key to stopping the Iconians once and for all. Derek's mouth went dry. He'd never told anyone his full name. How could they possibly... We offer our assistance in your quest, the Asgardian said. But on one condition, you must submit to a neural link to restore your lost memories. They may contain vital information about the coordinate. Hrathgar shot Derek a warning look. I don't like it. Poking around in your head, too risky. I'll do it, he said. The neural link was excruciating. White-hot pain seared through Derek's skull as buried memories surged to the surface. He saw himself younger, clad in the uniform of an elite Earth defense force, saw the Iconian invasion, the desperate race to hide the coordinate from their grasp. He relived that final fateful mission, the ambush. his team falling one by one until only he remained. And Kraxon, the Iconian commander's cruel, chitinous face as he pried the coordinate from Derek's bloody hands. The casual flick of his wrist as he wiped Derek's mind and condemned him to cryo exile. Derek's eyes snapped open with a gasp. He was back on the Shadowclaw, his crewmates watching him with concern. "I remember," he croaked. "I remember everything." Hrathgar helped him sit up. "What did you see?" Derek's gaze hardened. "I know where the Nexus is, and I know what the coordinate really is." He met the eyes of each of his crew in turn. "It's not just a superweapon, it's a key to something even more powerful." Rising to his feet, Derek strode to the helm, his steps sure and purposeful for the first time in decades. "Set course for the Maelstrom Nebula. We've got a galaxy to save." As the Shadowclaw leapt into hyperspace, Derek felt a newfound sense of determination settling over him. No more running, no more hiding. It was time to take the fight to the Iconians, and this time he would not fail. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and Derek would be damned if he let it fall. With his memories restored and the location of the Nexus revealed, Derek guided the Shadowclaw and the Asgardian ship into the heart of the Maelstrom Nebula. The swirling gases and crackling energy storms battered the vessels, their shields straining under the onslaught. "Rerouting auxiliary power to forward deflectors," Glix called out over the wailing alarms. The ship shuddered violently as a gravitational wave slammed into its hull. Derek gripped the armrests of his seat, jaw clenched. The secret route he remembered was treacherous, the markers he'd once used now lost to time and decay. He had to rely on instinct, guiding Hrathgar through the perilous passages from memory. Suddenly the sensors screamed a warning. "Incoming hostiles!" Zasha shouted. "It's the Iconian fleet!" On the view screen, a swarm of enemy ships emerged from the nebula, plasma cannons blazing. At their head was a familiar vessel, Kraxon's warship. "Evasive maneuvers!" Hrathgar barked, wrenching the controls. The Shadowclaw veered hard to port, narrowly evading a salvo of missiles. The Asgardian ship returned fire, its advanced weaponry carving molten gashes into the Iconian hulls. But there were too many. For every ship they destroyed, two more took its place. The Iconians were relentless, harrying the Shadowclaw through the nebula. "We can't keep this up," Derek said through gritted teeth as another blast rocked the ship. "We need to lose them." Hrathgar's eyes darted across the readouts, desperate for a solution. Then he saw it, a massive electrical storm, its charged particles swirling in a dizzying vortex. "Hold on to something," the Valaxian roared. He sent the Shadowclaw into a steep dive straight into the heart of the Maelstrom. Blinding light filled the viewscreen as lightning danced across the hull. The ship bucked and spasmed, sparks cascading from overloaded consoles. But Hrathgar held their course, teeth bared in fierce concentration. Gradually the sensors cleared. The electrical interference had masked their signature. They'd vanished from the Iconian scopes. "It worked," Zasha whooped. "They've lost us." Derek exhaled heavily, his pulse pounding. "Good flying, Hrathgar. Now let's find that station before they pick up our trail again." Using Derek's knowledge, they navigated the remaining obstacles, finally emerging in a hidden pocket of calm space. And there, floating in the void, was the Nexus. The station was a behemoth, its ancient hull pitted and scarred. No lights shone from its viewports. It hung dead and silent, a relic of a forgotten age. They docked without incident, the Shadowclaw sliding into an empty berth. As the airlock cycled open, Derek felt a chill run down his spine. He knew this place. He'd been here before, in another life. With Hrathgar and the others at his back, Derek ventured into the station's haunted corridors. Emergency lighting flickered fitfully, casting eerie shadows. Debris drifted in the zero gravity, the remnants of long-ago battles. Derek moved as if in a dream, his feet carrying him down paths he'd walked a lifetime ago. The memories were coming faster now, each corner and doorway triggering a flash of déjà vu. Finally, they stood before the entrance to the central chamber. The door hung askew, blasted off its hinges. Derek's heart raced as he stepped over the threshold. There in the center of the room was the coordinate. It sat on a raised pedestal, a small, unassuming device that belied its true power. Derek reached for it, hardly daring to breathe. His fingers closed around the coordinate's smooth surface. And that's when all hell broke loose. A plasma bolt seared past his ear, striking him in the shoulder. Derek cried out, staggering back. Craxon and his soldiers poured into the room, weapons blazing. "Take cover," Rathgar roared, shoving Derek behind a console. The Shadowclaw crew returned fire, the chamber erupting into a cacophony of plasma and shattering metal. In the chaos, the coordinate was knocked from its pedestal. It clattered to the floor, skittering away into the shadows. Derek and Craxon saw it at the same moment. They lunged for it, colliding in a tangle of limbs and snarls. They grappled savagely, rolling across the deck as the battle raged around them. The Nexus shuddered, the impacts of the dogfight outside taking their toll. Bulkheads groaned and buckled. Sparks rained down from ruptured conduits. But Derek hardly noticed. His world had narrowed to the coordinate, to the feel of Craxon's claws raking his flesh as they fought for possession. With a burst of desperate strength, Derek wrenched the device free. He scrambled to his feet, Craxon right behind him. The Iconian commander had him cornered, plasma rifle leveled at his chest. Craxon's mandibles twisted in a cruel smile. "Nowhere to run, human," he hissed. "The coordinate is mine." Before Derek could reply, the chamber wall exploded inward. An Iconian ship, its hull shredded and burning, had slammed into the Nexus. The impact hurled Craxon off his feet and straight through the breach. The Iconian commander's scream echoed as he vanished into the void. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, sealing the breach, but the damage was done. Red warning lights flashed as Craxon's blared. The Nexus was coming apart at the seams. They sprinted back to the Shadowclaw, dodging falling debris and gouts of flame. Derek's shoulder burned, blood seeping through his fingers where he clutched the coordinate. They barely made it aboard before the docking clamps disengaged. The Shadowclaw wrenched free of the disintegrating station, the Asgardian ship leading the way. But they held their course, limping away from the carnage and into the silent depths of space. In the sudden stillness, Derek stared down at the coordinate in his hands. It pulsed softly, ancient energies stirring within. Memories flooded through him, released by the device's proximity. He saw the Crucible, a weapon of unimaginable power, capable of unmaking the Iconian Empire at its very foundations. The coordinate was the key to finding it, and now it was in their hands. Derek met the eyes of his crewmates, saw the same realization dawning on their faces. They had won a crucial victory, but the true fight was only beginning. The Iconians would come for them. They would tear the galaxy apart to reclaim the coordinate. But Derek and his allies would be ready. Derek's grip tightened on the coordinate as the Shadowclaw sailed on through the stars toward an uncertain future. The Shadowclaw streaked through the void, the coordinate secure in its hold. Derek clutched the device, his mind racing with the implications of what they'd discovered. The Crucible, a weapon capable of unmaking the Iconian Empire. But they needed more than just the coordinate to unleash its power. The Asgardian homeworld loomed ahead, a shimmering jewel against the starscape. Valhalla, seat of the galaxy's most advanced civilization. If anyone could help them find the catalyst, it was the Asgardians. In the council chambers, Derek stood before the assembled leaders, the coordinate presented to them. "The Crucible," the High Chancellor said, her voice resonating with ancient wisdom. "A weapon of last resort, created by our forebears to ensure no empire could ever again subjugate the galaxy." She fixed Derek with a piercing gaze. "But to activate it, you will need the catalyst, 3 components scattered across the Iconians' most heavily guarded strongholds." Derek nodded grimly. "We're ready. The Iconians have to be stopped, no matter the cost." As they prepared for the mission, a squadron of elite Asgardian soldiers joined the crew of the Shadowclaw. Derek couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. With allies like these, maybe they stood a chance after all. Their first target, an Iconian research station orbiting a dying star, where the first catalyst fragment was hidden. Derek and Sasha took point, infiltrating the facility through a maintenance airlock. Inside, they were met with a nightmarish sight. Row upon row of stasis pods, each containing a genetically engineered Iconian super soldier. Derek's heart pounded as they crept past, praying the monsters within wouldn't wake. But their luck couldn't hold forever. An alarm blared and the pods began to hiss open. Sasha cursed, bringing her rifle to bear as the first abomination stumbled out, all mottled flesh and cybernetic enhancements. Derek opened fire, plasma bolts searing into the creature's hide. It roared in pain and rage, charging forward on massively muscled legs. They fought their way through the lab, dispatching wave after wave of the engineered horrors. Sasha took a hit, her armor smoking from a near miss, but she gritted her teeth and pushed on. At last they reached the containment vault. Derek's hands shook as he inputted the codes the Asgardians had provided. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the catalyst fragment within, pulsing with an eerie light. "Got it," Derek breathed, snatching the component. "Let's get the hell out of here." But the station was coming apart, the stress of the battle taking its toll. Alarms howled as bulkheads buckled, venting atmosphere into space. Derek and Sasha sprinted for the extraction point, leaping into the Shadowclaw's open airlock just as the research station tore itself apart. One down, 2 to go. The second fragment was entombed deep within an Iconian fortress world, an entire armada standing between them and their prize. But the Asgardians had a plan. As the Asgardian fleet engaged the Iconian ships, drawing their fire, Hrothgar led a strike team to the surface. They fought their way into the fortress, Derek at the vanguard, cutting through the Iconian defenders with grim determination. The fortress was a labyrinth of traps and automated defenses. Plasma turrets emerged from the walls, raking their ranks with fire. Glix managed to hack the control systems, turning the guns on their Iconian masters. At last they breached the vault. The second catalyst fragment sat within, taunting them. But as Derek reached for it, a field of crackling energy sprang up, hurling him back. "Together!" Derek shouted. As one, they threw themselves at the field, the energy searing their flesh, but their combined strength was too much. The barrier shattered, and Derek's hand closed around the catalyst fragment. They barely made it out before the fortress self-destructed, the shockwave nipping at the Shadowclaw's heels as they rocketed into the sky. The final piece lay within a clandestine Iconian bioweapons lab, concealed in the roiling heart of a toxic nebula. Derek and Glix took the lead, slipping in through the lab's waste disposal systems. Inside, the air was thick with noxious fumes, the acidic tang of chemicals burning their lungs. Derek's skin prickled, his suit's toxicity meters spiking into the red. Something moved in the mist, a shambling silhouette. Derek froze, dread coiling in his gut. They weren't alone in here. A monster lunged from the shadows, a twisted fusion of flesh and metal. A failed Iconian experiment driven mad by pain. Derek fired, the plasma bolts sizzling through the creature's deformed skull. But there were more drawn by the noise. Glix cried out as a taloned hand seized his leg, dragging him down. Derek whirled, putting a bolt through the thing's wrist. Glix scrambled free, his suit torn and leaking. They ran, the horrors loping after them. An alarm began to wail, the lab's automated containment systems detecting the breach. Bulkheads started to slam shut, locking down the sectors. They barely made it into the central chamber before the door sealed behind them. Derek searched frantically, praying the catalyst fragment was here. There, on a pedestal, a shard of dull metal. Derek lunged for it just as a hissing sound filled the air. The chamber's sterilization protocols had triggered. In seconds it would be flooded with corrosive decontaminants. Derek's hand closed around the catalyst shard. He turned to Glix, eyes wide. There was no way out. Glix met his gaze, a look of grim understanding passing between them. The Exerian pointed to a small access tunnel hidden behind a bank of servers. They hurled themselves into the cramped passage, just as a torrent of caustic chemicals gushed into the chamber. The lab shook as the substances reacted violently, setting off a chain of explosions. Hand over hand, they crawled through the maintenance shaft, the metal searing their palms. Behind them, the lab collapsed in on itself, the blasts nipping at their heels. At last they emerged, gulping down the relatively fresh air of the nebula. The Shadowclaw swooped in to collect them, Hrothgar hauling them aboard. Derek looked down at the catalyst fragments in his hands. At last, they had them all. The key to the Crucible, the weapon that could end the Iconian threat once and for all. But as they set course for the Crucible's hidden coordinates, a nagging doubt gnawed at Derek's mind. It had all been too easy. The Iconians had practically let them take the fragments. Craxon's mocking words echoed in his thoughts. Had they played right into the Iconians' hands? The Shadowclaw emerged from hyperspace, and Derek's blood ran cold. The Crucible hung before them, a massive ancient structure of twisting metal and pulsing energy. And surrounding it, an armada the likes of which Derek had never seen. Thousands of Iconian ships, their hulls bristling with weapons, all turned to face the intruders. On the view screen, a familiar face appeared. Craxon, his chitinous features twisted in a triumphant leer. And now, with the might of the Iconian armada at his back, the cruel warlord would be unstoppable. The galaxy would fall, and it would be all Derek's fault. Craxon's mandibles clicked in malicious glee. Thank you for your service. The screen went dark, a beat of horrified silence. Then the Iconian ships opened fire, and all hell broke loose. Derek's heart sank as the truth crashed over him. Craxon's mandibles twisted in a triumphant leer. "Did you really think we wouldn't let you get this far?" the Iconian commander hissed. "The coordinate, the catalyst, they're useless without each other, and the final piece is you, Derek Robertson." Hrothgar snarled, bringing his weapon to bear. "What the hell are you talking about?" Craxon laughed, a hideous chittering sound. "The coordinate requires Derek's DNA to activate, and now, thanks to your efforts, I have everything I need." The Iconian ships opened fire, plasma bolts slamming into the Shadowclaw's shields. Alarms shrieked as the ship bucked and heaved. But it was too late. Iconian boarding craft latched onto the Shadowclaw's hull like parasites, disgorging squads of heavily armed soldiers. They swarmed through the corridors, weapons blazing. Zasha shoved Derek behind her, firing her rifle into the oncoming horde. "Get to the escape pods," she shouted over the din of battle. Derek hesitated, torn. He couldn't just abandon his friends, but Zasha fixed him with a fierce glare. "Go," she ordered. "We'll hold them off." Hrothgar roared as he grappled with an Iconian soldier, his fangs bared. "Don't let that bastard get the coordinate." Derek turned to run, and came face to face with Craxon. The Iconian commander loomed over him, plasma blade humming in his clawed hand. "Leaving so soon?" Craxon taunted. "But we have so much to discuss." Behind him, Zasha cried out in pain, a plasma bolt searing through her armor. She crumpled to the deck, blood pooling beneath her. "No!" Derek screamed. He lunged at Craxon, but the Iconian was too fast. A blow from his armored fist sent Derek sprawling. Through blurred vision, Derek saw Hrothgar fall, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. The Valaxian was dragged away, still struggling, as Craxon's elite guard secured the ship. Craxon hauled Derek up by the collar, his mandibles inches from Derek's face. "Your friends have bought you a brief reprieve," the Iconian hissed, "but their sacrifice will be for nothing. The Crucible awaits her." As they approached the Crucible, Derek felt a chill run down his spine. The ancient structure hung in space, pulsing with an eerie light. Craxon's ship docked with a resounding clang, and the Iconian hauled Derek out, a triumphant sneer on his chitinous face. "Behold," Craxon gloated, gesturing to the Crucible's towering spires, "the instrument of your downfall, and my ascension." Inside the Crucible's control center, Craxon forced Derek to his knees before a pulsing console. He slammed the coordinate and catalyst into place, then grabbed Derek's hand, pressing it against a glowing panel. Derek screamed as needles pierced his skin, drawing blood. His DNA, the final key. The console lit up, ancient mechanisms stirring to life. But as the crucible began to power up, Derek felt a sudden clarity wash over him. This was wrong. The crucible wasn't a weapon. It was something far more terrifying. "Craxon, stop!" Derek shouted. "You don't know what you're doing." The Iconian laughed, a cruel, grating sound. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing. The crucible will remake the galaxy in my image, and you've just handed me the key." Derek stared at the pulsing energies swirling around the central chamber. A gateway, he realized, with sudden, horrifying clarity, to the nexus of all realities, the cosmic linchpin that held the multiverse together. And Craxon meant to unravel it all, to reshape existence itself. "You're insane," Derek gasped. "You'll destroy everything." Derek lunged at the Iconian, desperation fueling his attack. They grappled, rolling across the floor as the crucible shook and shuddered, ancient energies building to a crescendo. With a burst of strength, Derek managed to hurl Craxon away from the controls, but it was too late. The gateway was opening, raw cosmic power spilling forth. Derek stared into the maelstrom, transfixed. He saw the shining threads that wove the tapestry of reality, stretching out to infinity, and he saw what Craxon's mad ambition would do to that delicate web. There was only one way to stop it, only one path left to take. Derek glanced back at Craxon, the Iconian struggling to rise. Resolve hardened in Derek's heart. And with that he leapt into the cosmic storm. Craxon's howl of rage echoed behind him as the maelstrom swallowed him whole. Derek tumbled through an impossible space, assaulted by sights and sensations beyond comprehension. He saw himself, reflected in a million shattered realities. In one he knelt in a lush garden, playing with a child who had his eyes. A life of peace and simplicity, one he had never known. In another, he lay dead on a cold metal floor, eyes staring sightlessly at the stars. The Iconian boot came down, grinding his skull to dust. Humanity's last gasp, snuffed out. On and on they came, the lives he had never lived, the deaths he had never died, each one a shard of the man he was, the man he could have been. And through it all a presence, vast and ancient, watching him with eyes that had seen the birth and death of galaxies. "Derek Robertson." The voice was everywhere and nowhere, resonating in his bones. "You have come far, child of Earth." He found himself standing on a plain of shimmering mist, face to face with a being of pure light. It regarded him with a gaze that pierced his soul. "I am the Nexus," the entity said, "the heart of all creation, and you, Derek, are the key to its survival." Images flashed through Derek's mind. 1,000 versions of himself, all standing in this same spot, all facing this same choice. "Across the multiverse, in every reality, you are the one who bears this burden," the Nexus said. "The one who must make the sacrifice." Derek shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "I don't understand. Why me?" The Nexus pulsed with gentle light. "Because you, Derek Robertson, have always had the strength to do what must be done, to put the needs of the many before your own." The entity's light engulfed him, filling him with a sudden blazing clarity. He saw what he had to do, the only thing he could do. Derek reached out, his consciousness expanding to touch the very fabric of existence. He felt the Nexus flowing through him, a conduit of pure cosmic will. And with a thought, he began to unravel the gateway, to collapse the breach that Craxon had so recklessly torn open. The Nexus shuddered around him, reality convulsing as the rift began to seal. Derek poured everything he had into the effort, his mind and soul straining to hold the multiverse together. Through the rapidly shrinking gateway, he caught a final glimpse of the crucible. Craxon caught in the backlash of cosmic energy, his body disintegrating atom by atom as he howled in impotent fury. And beyond him, the Iconian armada consumed by the fury of a cosmic storm, their ships torn apart like leaves in a hurricane. The galaxy would never know his name, but they would live free, unshackled by the chains of Iconian oppression, and that was enough. Derek closed his eyes, a smile on his face as the light of the Nexus engulfed him. He had found his purpose, his place in the grand design. And as he surrendered himself to the infinite, he knew that at long last his journey was complete. Derek jolted awake, his heart pounding. He blinked, taking in his surroundings, the familiar confines of the Shadowclaw's medbay. Hrothgar stood over him, a rare smile on the Valaxian's scaly face. "Welcome back to the land of the living," Hrothgar rumbled. "You had us worried there for a bit." Derek pushed himself up on his elbows, wincing at the protest from his battered body. What happened? The Nexus, the Iconians... "All gone," Zasha said, limping into view. Her arm was in a sling, her face bruised, but her eyes shone with triumph. "The Iconian fleet is nothing but scrap metal now, and Craxon, well, I doubt even his atoms are left." Derek let out a shaky breath, the memories flooding back. The desperate battle, the cosmic maelstrom of the Nexus, the final confrontation with Craxon. It seemed almost like a dream. But it was real. They had won. Against all odds, they had defeated the Iconian Empire. The celebration was short-lived, however. As Derek and the crew of the Shadowclaw soon learned, the galaxy was far from at peace. With Craxon's iron grip shattered, a dozen factions now scrabbled for power in the vacuum he left behind. Old rivalries, long suppressed under Iconian rule, flared back to life. The Free Worlds Alliance, the loose coalition of planets that had aided Derek in his fight, now found itself beset on all sides. It was into this chaos that Derek and his team, now hailed as the saviors of the galaxy, were thrust. Summoned to an emergency summit of the Free Worlds, they found themselves in the midst of a heated debate. "The Iconians cannot be trusted," a grizzled human admiral shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "They've enslaved and slaughtered us for centuries, and now we're supposed to believe they've had a change of heart?" "Not all Iconians are the same," a soft voice countered. Derek turned to see a slender Iconian female, her chitinous features somehow more delicate than Craxon's had been. "Many of us never believed in my father's brutal methods." A gasp ran around the room. "Your father?" Derek asked, stunned. The Iconian inclined her head. "I am Princess Azara, daughter of Craxon, and I have worked my entire life to undermine his tyrannical regime from within." Azara went on to explain that with Craxon's death, the Iconian Empire teetered on the brink of civil war. Hardliners loyal to Craxon's vision battled reformists who sought a more peaceful path. Azara was the de facto leader of these reformists, but her position was tenuous. "I come to you now seeking alliance," Azara said, her voice ringing clear. "Together we can forge a new era of cooperation and unity between our peoples. I ask for your support in my bid for the Iconian throne." The room erupted into argument once more. Many were unwilling to trust any Iconian, regardless of their claimed intentions. The wounds of the past ran too deep. Derek watched the debate rage torn. Could they really trust Azara, or was this just another Iconian ploy? His musings were interrupted by a sudden tremor that shook the very foundations of the summit hall. Alarms blared as guards rushed in, weapons drawn. "We're under attack," one shouted. "Iconian loyalists have breached the perimeter." In the chaos, Derek saw a group of armed Iconians burst into the room, plasma rifles blazing. They cut down the guards with ruthless efficiency, then turned their weapons on the assembled delegates. Derek drew his own weapon, ready to fight, but it was too late. In the confusion, the loyalists had seized Azara, dragging her away even as she struggled and fought. "Derek," she cried out, "you must not let them win. The future of the galaxy depends on it." Then she was gone, vanished into the smoke and chaos. The loyalist leader's voice boomed out once more, magnified by some unseen technology. "People of the Free Worlds, you have one rotation to surrender unconditionally to the true Iconian Empire. Resist, and your precious princess dies, along with your dream of peace." The transmission cut out, leaving stunned silence in its wake. Derek clenched his fists, a cold fury rising within him. He turned to his team, seeing the same determination in their eyes. They had come too far, fought too hard, to let it end like this. "Gear up," he said grimly. "We're going after her, and we're going to show those Iconian bastards what happens when you mess with the Shadow Claw crew." Hrothgar grinned fiercely, already checking his weapons. "Thought you'd never ask. Let's go kick some thorax." They tracked the Loyalists to a fortified bunker on a remote airless moon. Scans showed it to be heavily guarded, with multi-layered defenses and patrols. "We'll never fight our way in head-on," Zasha noted, studying the readouts. "We need to be smart about this." Derek nodded. "Agreed. We go in quiet, find Azara, and get out before they even know we're there." It was easier said than done. Even with their skills and technology, infiltrating the bunker was a tense, nerve-wracking affair. They had to time their movements precisely, darting from shadow to shadow, hacking security systems, and neutralizing patrols with quick, silent takedowns. Derek's heart pounded as they descended deeper into the bunker, every sense on high alert. One mistake, one slip, and it could all be over. At last they reached the detention level. Derek's scanner pinged softly, indicating a life sign in one of the cells. Azara. They moved quickly, Glix's nimble fingers making short work of the lock. The door hissed open, and alarms blared to life, the harsh sound shattering the tense silence. They had been discovered. Derek rushed into the cell, finding Azara shackled to the wall. He cut her free with a few quick blasts, catching her as she stumbled. "I knew you'd come," she gasped, her voice weak but filled with relief. "Thank me later," Derek said, pulling her arm over his shoulder. "Right now we need to move." They fought their way back through the bunker, Azara proving herself a capable fighter despite her ordeal. The narrow corridors became a brutal killing field, choked with the bodies of fallen Iconians. But there were always more to take their place, an endless tide of fanatics determined to die for their twisted cause. Derek's team was driven back, step by step, the extraction point seeming to recede further with each passing moment. Finally they burst into the hangar bay, the Shadow Claw waiting invitingly just ahead. But between them and freedom stood a towering war droid, bristling with weapons. Derek gritted his teeth, raising his rifle. "Nearly," he repeated. "Azara, you know Iconian tech. How do we take this thing down?" Azara's eyes darted over the droid, analytical even in the heat of battle. The power core in the chest. A sustained burst might overload it, but you'd have to get in close. There was no time for further strategizing. The droid lumbered forward, energy weapons powering up with an ominous whine. Derek and Azara moved as one, dodging and weaving, drawing the droid's fire. Hrothgar and the others provided covering fire, their weapons scorching the droid's armored hide, but doing little real damage. Derek saw his opening, a hairline fracture in the droid's chestplate exposed by a well-placed shot from Zasha. He lunged forward, jamming his rifle barrel into the gap and holding down the trigger. The droid convulsed, sparks and smoke pouring from its frame as its core went critical. Derek barely managed to dive clear before it exploded, the shockwave hurling him across the hangar. Ears ringing, vision blurred, Derek staggered to his feet. The droid was a smouldering ruin, but the bunker around them shook and shuddered, alarms blaring. "That's going to blow," Glix shouted over the din. "We need to go now." They piled into the Shadow Claw, Hrothgar throwing the engines to full power before the ramp was even fully closed. The ship rocketed out of the hangar, the explosion of the bunker chasing at their heels like an angry god. They outran the blast, but only just. As the Shadow Claw soared away from the moon, the bunker collapsed in on itself, a miniature sun blooming on the surface. In the aftermath, as they caught their breath and tended their wounds, Derek turned to Azara. "Now what?" he asked. "The Loyalists are still out there. The war for the Iconian throne is just beginning." Azara met his gaze, her eyes fierce with determination. "Now we finish what we started. We go before the free worlds, and I make my case. I will show them that a new way is possible, that the cycle of hatred and fear can be broken." She clasped Derek's hand, her grip strong. "And with you by my side, Derek Robertson, I believe we can succeed. Together, we will forge a new future for the galaxy." Derek nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. It would not be easy. The scars of the past ran deep, the mistrust and enmity bred by centuries of war not easily forgotten. But for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to hope. In the aftermath of the Iconian Empire's fall, Azara took her rightful place on the throne. A new era dawned, one of hope and healing. But the scars of centuries would not fade overnight. Pockets of Iconian loyalists, still clinging to Kraxon's brutal legacy, lashed out in guerrilla attacks. Worlds once under the Iconian boot, now free, cried out for retribution. Amid this turmoil, Derek and his team worked tirelessly to maintain the fragile peace. They negotiated ceasefires, rooted out extremist cells, and delivered aid to war-torn planets. But something more sinister lurked in the shadows. A string of seemingly unrelated incidents, a riot on a frontier colony, a mysterious assassination, a ship vanishing without a trace, hinted at a hidden hand pulling the strings. Derek pored over the reports, a nagging sense of unease growing. "These aren't random," he muttered. "There's a pattern here, but I can't quite grasp it." Rathgar leaned in, his brow furrowed. "I've seen this before, in the Outer Rim during the Iconian occupation. Chaos sown with surgical precision, divide and conquer." Zasha nodded grimly. "Someone's trying to destabilize the New Order, but who and why?" The answer came from an unexpected source, a distress call from a remote research outpost, claiming to have uncovered a terrifying secret. Derek and his team raced to the outpost, only to find it in ruins. Amid the wreckage they discovered a single survivor, a xenoarchaeologist named Dr. Serene. "They called themselves the Void Lords," Serene whispered, her eyes haunted. "Ancient beings from beyond our dimension. They feed on chaos, on suffering, and they're coming." In the outpost's shattered databanks, they found fragments of a chilling truth. The Void Lords had been imprisoned eons ago by the same ancient race that built the Crucible. Kraxon's reckless use of the device had shattered their chains. Now they sought to plunge the galaxy into eternal strife, to feast on the agony of trillions. And they had agents, cultists and thralls, seeded throughout the stars, ready to do their bidding. Derek's fists clenched. "We have to stop them. We have to find a way to push them back, to seal the breach." It was a race against time. Derek and his allies chased down every lead, every whisper of Void Lord influence. They battled mind-controlled assassins in the neon-lit alleys of frontier worlds, dueled rogue psionics in the twisted halls of abandoned space hulks. But the Void Lords always seemed to be one step ahead. For every cult they smashed, every portal they closed, two more sprung up in their place. Desperation led them to the shattered remains of a long-dead civilization, said to have been the first victims of the Void Lords. In the crumbling ruins of their once great cities, Derek's team uncovered an ancient artifact, a shard of the same material as the Crucible. Azara's eyes widened as her scans revealed its purpose. This is a key, a control matrix for the Crucible's true function. Realization dawned like a cold sun. The Crucible was never a weapon. It was a lock. And the key had been shattered and scattered to prevent the Void Lords from ever breaking free. But now, with the Crucible destroyed, the key was useless. The gate stood open, and the horrors beyond were spilling through. Grim resolve settled over the team. They knew what had to be done. The Void Lords had to be pushed back, the breach sealed at any cost. Derek and Azara rallied the forces of the Free Worlds and the reformed Iconian Empire. 1,000 ships, crewed by a dozen species, assembled for a desperate assault on the dimensional rift. It was a battle unlike any the galaxy had seen. The Void Lord's eldritch energies warped space and time, dragging ships into null space vortices, turning crews inside out. Derek watched in horror as a void leviathan, a miles-long monstrosity of writhing tentacles and gnashing maws, ripped an Iconian dreadnought apart like tin foil. But he had no time to grieve. He led a strike team onto the Void Lord's flagship, a nightmarish construct of living metal and pulsing flesh. They fought their way through labyrinthine corridors of pulsing meat and skittering horrors, each one a twisted mockery of life. At the heart of the abomination, they found the interdimensional drive core, a pulsing knot of darkness that hurt the eyes to look at. And before it stood the Void Lord leader, a towering being of pure shadow and malice. "Foolish mortals," it hissed, its voice the scrape of coffin lids. "You only delay the inevitable. Your galaxy will burn. Your souls will shriek in our bellies for eternity." The battle was joined, blade against claw, will against will. Derek pitted his mind against the Void Lords, a psychic duel played out against a backdrop of swirling madness. He felt the Void Lord's hunger, its contempt for all living things, but he also felt the strength of those fighting beside him, the billions of lives counting on him. With a roar of defiance, Derek pushed back, his will a lance of pure light piercing the darkness. The Void Lord recoiled, its form flickering. Seizing the moment, Derek plunged his blade into the drive core. Feedback surged through the system, a cascade of ruptured energies. The flagship bucked and heaved, the rift collapsing in on itself with a soundless implosion. The Void Lord's screams echoed through Derek's mind as they were dragged back into the abyss, the breach sealing shut behind them. But the victory was bitter. Many had fallen, Iconian and free worlds alike. The Shadowclaw limped back to the Galactic summit, its hull scarred and scorched. Before the assembled leaders, Derek and Azara spoke of sacrifice, of unity in the face of darkness. They forged a pact, Iconian and human, Valaxian and Ixarian, a dozen races agreeing to stand together. The road ahead would be long, wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But with the Void Lords banished and a new spirit of cooperation rising, there was hope. Derek looked out at the stars, remembering the friends he'd lost, the battles he'd fought. The war was over, but the struggle for peace, for understanding. The Shadowclaw drifted through the endless expanse of space, its hull scarred and battle-worn. Aboard the ship, Derek pored over the data files they had recovered from the Iconian archives, his brow furrowed in concentration. For weeks, he and Azara had been working to forge a new alliance between the Iconians and the free worlds, meeting with leaders and diplomats, hammering out treaties and agreements. It was exhausting work, but it was worth it to see the first tentative steps towards a lasting peace. But as Derek delved deeper into the archives, a chill ran down his spine. He double-checked the data, hoping against hope that he was mistaken. But there it was, in cold, hard code, the truth about the Void Lords. They were not some ancient external threat as everyone had believed. They were a creation of the Iconians themselves, born from a disastrous experiment with interdimensional energy centuries ago, and Kraxon had known. He had used the threat of the Void Lords to maintain his iron grip on the galaxy. Derek leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. This changed everything. Azara had to know, but how could he tell her that her people's entire history was built on a lie? As if on cue, the door to his quarters hissed open, and Azara stepped in. She looked tired but pleased, a small smile on her face. "The Valaxian ambassador just signed the trade agreement," she said. "That's the last of the core worlds. We did it, Derek. We're really doing it." Derek couldn't meet her eyes. "Azara, there's something you need to see." He brought up the data on his screen, watching Azara's face as she read. Her smile faded, replaced by shock, then horror, then a grief so profound it shook Derek to his core. "This can't be," she whispered. "My people, we couldn't have—" But the evidence was irrefutable. The Iconians, in their hubris and their lust for power, had unleashed the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known, and they had lied about it for centuries. Azara sank into a chair, her head in her hands. Derek reached out to comfort her, but she pulled away. "I have to make this right," she said, her voice hardening with resolve. "I have to tell the truth, no matter the cost." Derek nodded grimly. "I'll stand with you, but Azara, this could destroy the peace we've worked so hard to build." "Then so be it," Azara said. I will not lead my people with a lie. They deserve the truth, and they will have it. The Galactic Council chamber was in an uproar. Representatives from 100 worlds shouted and argued, their voices rising in a cacophony of anger and disbelief. At the center of the storm stood Derek and Azara, the data from the Iconian archives displayed on a giant holoscreen behind them. "This is preposterous," the human ambassador shouted. "You expect us to believe that the Iconians created the very threat they claim to protect us from?" "I understand your skepticism," Derek said, his voice calm but firm. "I didn't want to believe it either, but the evidence is clear. The Void Lords were an Iconian creation, and Kraxon used them to maintain his power." He turned to Azara, who stood tall and proud despite the hostility directed at her. "Princess Azara has confirmed the truth of these findings. She is here to take responsibility on behalf of her people." Azara stepped forward, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "My people have committed a great wrong. For centuries we have lied to you and to ourselves. We have used the specter of the Void Lords to justify our aggression, our oppression. No more." She paused, looking out at the sea of angry faces. "As of this moment I abdicate my throne. I submit myself to the judgment of this council and to the will of the free worlds. The Iconians are ready to atone for our past and to build a new future together, based on truth and trust." The chamber fell silent, stunned by Azara's declaration. Then slowly a murmur began to build, growing louder and louder until it was a roar of approval. But the moment was short-lived. An alarm blared, red lights flashing. On the holoscreen a new image appeared, a swirling vortex of darkness, pulsing with malevolent energy. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The remnants of the Void Lords thought destroyed were emerging from the rift in force. Iconian worlds were already under attack, their defenses in disarray without Azara's leadership. The free world ships were mobilizing, but there was hesitation, mistrust. Could they really fight alongside the Iconians, after all that had been revealed? Derek knew that hesitation could be fatal. He strode to the center of the chamber, his voice booming out over the chaos. "I know trust is in short supply right now. I know the wounds of the past are deep, but if we don't stand together, if we don't fight as one, we will fall." He looked around at the assembled leaders, his gaze fierce and determined. "I'm taking the Shadow Claw into that rift. I'm going to end this threat once and for all, and I'm asking you, all of you, to stand with me, Iconian and free worlds alike." For a moment there was silence. Then Hrathgar stepped forward, placing his hand on Derek's shoulder. "The Valaxians are with you." One by one, the other leaders stepped forward, pledging their ships, their warriors. Azara, tears in her eyes, pledged what remained of the Iconian fleet. It was a fragile alliance, forged in the heat of crisis. But as Derek looked out at the determined faces around him, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps, even in their darkest hour, they could find a way to stand together. The rift yawned before them, a swirling maelstrom of darkness and chaos. Derek stood on the bridge of the Shadow Claw, Azara and Hrathgar at his side, as the combined fleet of Iconian and Free World ships prepared for the final assault. It was a sight he had never imagined. Iconian warships flying in formation with Valaxian cruisers, human fighters darting between Ixerian frigates. 1,000 ships, united in purpose, ready to face the darkness. "All ships, this is Commander Robertson," Derek said. His voice carried over the fleet-wide comm. "Today we face the greatest threat our galaxy has ever known. Today we put aside our differences and stand as one. For our homes, for our people, for our future. Let's bring the light." A cheer went up from the fleet, a roar of defiance against the encroaching shadows. Then, as one, they plunged into the rift. Immediately, they were engulfed in a maelstrom of swirling energy, their ships tossed and buffeted by interdimensional winds. Strange lights danced across their view screens, ghostly apparitions that seemed to phase in and out of reality. And there, waiting for them in the heart of the chaos, was the Void Lord's armada, grotesque ships that seemed grown rather than built, pulsing with malevolent energy. At their center, a vessel that dwarfed all the others, a living citadel of darkness. The battle was joined, beams of energy crisscrossing the void, ships exploding in bursts of light and shrapnel. Derek threw the Shadowclaw into the fray, Hrathgar manning the weapons with grim determination. They fought their way to the heart of the enemy fleet, the massive Void Lord flagship looming before them. Its surface writhed with tentacles and grasping appendages, a horror made manifest. "There," Azara said, pointing to a pulsing node on the ship's surface. "The interdimensional drive core. If we can destroy that, we can collapse the rift." But even as the Allied fleet poured fire into the flagship, the Void Lord's power was too great. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, ensnaring ships and crushing them like tin cans. The flagship's weapons tore through shields and armor like paper. Derek watched in horror as friendly ships winked out of existence all around him, consumed by the darkness. The Shadowclaw shuddered under the onslaught, alarms blaring, sparks cascading from ruptured consoles. "We're not going to make it," Hrathgar growled, his hands flying over the weapons controls. "We need to pull back, regroup." He turned to Azara, his eyes blazing with determination. "With me." Together they raced to the Shadowclaw's airlock, donning thruster packs. With a final nod to Hrathgar, they launched themselves into the void, streaking towards the Void Lord flagship. They dodged and weaved through the chaos of the battle, plasma beams and debris whipping past them. The flagship loomed larger and larger, its surface a writhing mass of darkness. They slammed into the hull, magnetic clamps locking them in place. Derek ignited his plasma torch, cutting through the fleshy surface, Azara covering him with bursts of fire from her pulse rifle. They plunged into the heart of the ship, fighting their way through nightmarish corridors of pulsing flesh and grasping appendages. Derek's mind reeled at the alien horror of it all, but he pushed forward, driven by a grim determination. At last they reached the interdimensional drive core, a pulsing knot of darkness that seemed to drink in the light. And there, waiting for them, was the Void Lord itself, a towering being of shadow and malice. "Foolish mortals," it hissed, its voice the scrape of coffin lids. "You only hasten your own destruction." Derek and Azara opened fire, plasma bolts and pulse beams tearing into the Void Lord's shadowy form. But it was like shooting smoke, the wounds closing as fast as they appeared. The Void Lord lashed out, tendrils of darkness ensnaring Derek, lifting him into the air. He felt the cold touch of the void, felt it starting to leach the life from his body. But Azara was there, her plasma blade flashing, severing the tendrils. Derek dropped to the ground, gasping for breath. Together, they charged the drive core, weapons blazing. The Void Lord howled in rage and pain, its form starting to come apart at the seams. With a final burst of fire, the drive core ruptured, a cascade of interdimensional energy tearing through the flagship. Derek and Azara were thrown back, the explosion consuming the Void Lord in a burst of searing light. Around them, the flagship started to come apart, the rift collapsing in on itself. Derek grabbed Azara, activating his thruster pack, propelling them towards the rapidly closing portal. They burst out into normal space just as the rift slammed shut behind them, the shockwave hurling them tumbling through the void. The Shadowclaw was there, tractor beams snagging them, pulling them to safety. As they stumbled onto the bridge, battered and bloodied but alive, a cheer went up from the crew. On the view screens, the remains of the Void Lord Armada drifted, lifeless and dark. They had won, but as Derek looked around at the battered remnants of the fleet, at the empty seats where friends and comrades once sat, he knew the cost had been high. The journey back to the Galactic Council was a somber one. Derek sat in his quarters, staring out at the stars, lost in thought. As Zara stepped in, her face etched with grief and exhaustion. "The final casualty reports are in," she said softly. "We lost a lot of good people out there." Azara shook her head. "He didn't make it. Went down with his ship, taking a dozen Void Lord vessels with him." Derek closed his eyes, feeling the weight of every lost friend, every shattered ship. The price of victory had been steep. But as he stepped into the council chamber, as he saw the faces of the assembled leaders, he knew it had not been in vain. There was grief there, yes, but also determination, a fire that had been tempered in the crucible of battle. They had fought together, bled together, Iconian and free worlds united at last. It was a fragile bond, but it was a start. Azara stepped forward, her head high despite the weight of her people's sins. She offered herself up for judgment, ready to accept whatever punishment the council deemed fit. But there was no condemnation in their eyes, only a recognition of her courage, her willingness to put right the wrongs of the past. The vote was unanimous. Azara would not be punished, but rather given a chance to atone. She would serve as the bridge between Iconian and free worlds, working to forge a lasting peace, a true alliance. As the council session ended, as the leaders of 100 worlds filed out to begin the long work of rebuilding, Derek found himself alone with Azara. "I don't know if I'm worthy of this," she said softly, staring out at the stars. "After everything my people have done, how can I possibly make amends?" Derek placed a hand on her shoulder, feeling the weight of his own sins, his own regrets. "We start small," he said. "One day at a time, one choice at a time. We learn from the past, but we don't let it define us." Azara nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "Together?" "Together," Derek affirmed. And as they stood there watching the first joint Iconian and Free Worlds patrols set out into the stars, Derek felt a flicker of hope amid the grief and the pain. The road ahead would be long. The scars would never fully heal, the losses never fully fade. But as long as there were those willing to fight for a better tomorrow, as long as there were those who still believed in the light, then there would always be hope, even in the darkest of nights. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.